from Conde Nast, Sabrina Daryanani. I have that right, Sabrina? Daryanani.
Absolutely perfect.
That's okay. And I want, before I turn it over to Sabrina, I want to do a special call out to the organization that helped recruit Sabrina and other attendees here today and at previous email summits, the Women of Email, a wonderful organization that has helped bring more women into the industry, has helped mentor and bring up a lot of younger women who are working in the industry, and has helped us over the last few years ensure that for at least the last 4 or 5 years, the majority of the speakers at the email summit are women, which we're really proud of and is one of the signatures of this event. And I want to spend a special thanks to Charma Parker and Jen Capstro, who's been helping us forever on this. Sabrina, you're coming to us from the UK, right?
I am. So it's a little bit later in the evening. It's almost 9:30 p.m., but it's a very exciting time to join. And thank you so much for having me.
And Sabrina leads the effort to build a center of excellence across 11 countries for that media brand. And she's focused on engagement, on revenue, on driving traffic to this audience-centric and data-driven model. And she's going to give us a case study now about how she built it so it can both globalize and localize messaging across different countries. And I'm going to shut up and let you have at it, Sabrina.
Thank you so much, and thanks again for having me as well. So yes, as mentioned, I'm Sabrina Daryanani. I lead. I'm the global head of CRM communications. I am based in the London headquarters for Conde Nast as well. And I'm just going to share my screen so that I can take you through a few slides that will really help. So, as mentioned, we've got 2 head offices. We've got a headquarter in New York, we've got a headquarter in London, but I think the way that we built the London headquarter is really interesting because it's very much a center of excellence model. And there's definitely nuggets of information that have been really useful in my 2.5 years at Conde Nast as well, that I thought might be good to share with this audience as well. So just to start, I want to talk a little bit about Condé and about, how this international headquarters started as well. For anyone that knows, Conde Nast owns and publishes around the world. We're in 32 different markets as well. And we have a lot of different brands such as Vogue, Wired, GQ, AD, The New Yorker in the US as well. So there's the layer of the different countries, and then there's a layer of the different brands within the countries. So when I joined 2.5 years ago, the international head office was already set up, but there wasn't a CRM discipline. And so the challenge or the landscape that I had ahead of me was, we had this international headquarter, we had the different disciplines within them as well. And then we had all the different markets and then a different variety of brands in each country as well. So for example, in Taiwan, we only have Vogue and GQ, but in India, we've got Vogue, GQ, Conde Nast Traveler, and Architecture Digest as well. So it's a very varied number of brands in the different countries as well. So that's kind of layer 1 of what we have to look at. But then there's the challenges as well from a CRM perspective. So one, the markets weren't even talking to each other. So there wasn't really a central strategy. We all had the same objective. All the different countries had the same CRM objectives of, like Steve said, driving engagement, driving retention, driving loyalty as well, generating revenue, but there wasn't a central strategy. It was very much each country doing their own thing and their own strategy as well. We had duplicate costs. So we had about 12 different email service providers when I joined. We have been doing a massive effort to move 10 countries onto one. We do have some data legislations in some countries as well. No holistic reporting. So if we needed any CRM email reporting, we had to go through to each country and ask them as well. Expertise and resource was very different in the different markets. We were very much a print business that then moved to digital, and some countries have evolved in that transformation a lot more than others as well. And therefore, the CRM teams that we have in the different markets are very different in terms of size, in terms of expertise, in terms of years that they've been doing this as well. We have different data legislations. So Russia is one of the countries we work with, but actually, data has to be stored and processed in Russia first. That's something else to take into account. GDPR is obviously something to take into account as well. And then we've got tool limitations. So whether just thinking from an email perspective, we had some countries on tools like MailChimp, and then some countries on more legacy tools like Adestra as well. So there was a whole range of like different types of tools we were using, and different capabilities that the tools had as well. So the vision that really was what I started building for the CRM Center of Excellence in London was the vision was really leverage our data to deepen the relationship with our audience and make every interaction personal and relevant. Very much what a CRM team should really focus on doing. But the challenge that we have, and what I really wanted to make sure we were communicating as well, is we did want to have a global framework, but we did want to make sure we were still focusing on local delivery. We still have all those different country teams, and those are not going anywhere. We have a lot of local expertise. We have a lot of local learning. It's just how do we mix that with having some sort of global strategy and global framework and balancing those two things as well. So when I interviewed for Conde Nast, I think I described it a little bit as like an internal consultancy where the clients are actually the different country teams versus external clients as well. So we're really trying to support them. So building this has been a challenge, and we're still, still underway of making a lot of this progress happen and a lot of this implementation happen. We started, like I said, a lot with the platform, but there's obviously platform, process, and people, and we've been focusing on all three. But we've definitely got some learnings that I wanted to share, and really good insights that I think apply to whether, it's your company focuses on multi-brand, multi-market, or even on one brand and in one market, but actually dealing with different teams as well. And the first one is really building relationships. So, I came to Conde Nast from a consultancy and with a very much a consultancy hat on, which was an advantage for sure in this particular role, but really focusing on saying that Center of Excellence model is a partnership with local markets. We're not taking anything away. The biggest fear I had when I joined was a local team's going to think we're taking away their work or we're telling them what to do. I don't want to have that kind of relationship, and I want to make sure it is a partnership as well. And we rely on that expertise and what they know and what they've been building for so long as well. Listening is key. I think I've spent my first 6 or 7 months in the job just building relationships, listening to the teams, trying to get as much information as I could about their goals, their challenges, their team structure as well, what they like, what they would love to do, what they can't do, why couldn't they do it as well? Was it, a tools thing? Was it a people thing? Was it a process thing? So that we could really get the best value as well from this relationship too. We built a global CRM community. So we catch up once a month. We have a call with all the CRM leads around the world as well. We have, Slack channels, but really built that community so everyone could talk to each other about best practices, challenges. So really building that support network that is really focused around CRM as well. And one thing obviously that is super important, we work across 5 countries in Asia, 5 in Europe and Mexico, is to be really mindful of language, but also time zones as well. I think on the language side, I think the simpler we keep things, the better. And sometimes that's really hard, especially with acronyms and jargon, which is so second nature to us as in the CRM world as well. So that's definitely been really, really important. The second one really being a unified approach. So making sure that everyone understood and had alignment on what the vision was and the purpose was of CRM for the company. So not focused on what it was for the headquarters, not focused on what it was for a particular country, but what it was for the company, what it meant, and what goals, what overall company goals we were aligned to as well. Making sure we have regular updates with stakeholders, and we work, any CRM person I know will work with so many different teams like product and acquisition marketing as well, and on the creative side and designers. So it's really important to make sure that we're keeping everyone up to date on projects that are happening. Like I said, our biggest project has been this transformation, tool transformation project to one single global ESP as well. And therefore keeping everyone in the loop has been extremely, extremely important for the markets, but also centrally for the different teams that we have and the different departments that we have. One thing that's worked really well is actually have centralized support and vendor management. So my team in London actually looks after the relationships we have with all the different platform providers and the vendors. whether that's agencies, whether that's platform providers, tool providers, whatever it is, we're the first point of call for all the country teams. And then if we can't answer the question, we bubble it up to the vendor through support and so on as well. But it means that, first of all, we don't have 11 different countries bombarding, the different vendors, agencies, tools, all at the same time, but also that we're not repeating the same questions, and that we're actually saying, if we're getting the same question several times, what can we do to be better at this? What process can we include? What documentation can we do? Which is really important. I'll come on to that in a second as well. And the other one that's been extremely important is consistency. So, naming of campaigns, for example, but also thinking about having a unified global data schema. So how do we make sure the data, we're talking about data the same way, and we've got, collecting the same things, or even having it as the same field names as well, will really help us allow us to do global reporting as well, and actually, help us with the single customer view project we've got going on at the same time as well. But also, it's really important in terms of KPIs. So I think one thing that's really common in all my years in CRM has been click rate. There's different ways that people describe click rate. Some people, it's clicks over delivered, and some it's clicks over open. How do we just make sure we're all talking the same stats the same way as well? And we've got alignment. And it sounds so simple, but it's actually really important, especially if we're sharing this in the CRM community, but also across markets, and then with the other stakeholders too. So I touched on this a little bit, but documentation has been absolutely key, as you can probably imagine, with working with different markets and different brands as well. Within those, we built a Google site. It is actually a great tool to use and very easy to use as well. So I would definitely recommend it. And what we've done is even had, like we've got an FAQ section for any of those questions that keep coming up as well, or we've added it to one of our other sections too. The global progress report is really what I mentioned about, keeping stakeholders and managing upwards as well. How do we make sure that people have access to the information they need without us being that roadblock as well, and without us being that blocker? Because that is when the frustrations could happen. And we've got so many stakeholders in the mix that we don't want to let that be the case as well. We've got, working docs per country, we've got great project plans, but all of this is super key. And the great news is that once you've set it up once, you can really replicate it. We've got this for each country as well, but it's also really improved our relationship with vendors as well, because it's meant that there's full transparency of what we're working on, what expectations we have, the priority of things as well. But also we've worked a lot on best practice guides. So for example, onboarding guides, what do they look like, win back guides as well. And those have been not only what is best practice in terms of email marketing, for example, but also what have we seen that's worked in specific markets for us as well. So has there been a case study in a particular country that we actually just want to scale to all other countries as well? And since we're on the same tool, it's much easier to replicate those as well. And the last one, and this is very, very apt for everything that's happened in 2020, is flexibility. We definitely, it's not a one size fits all kind of model. We definitely have specific market use cases that we have to take into account, and that can change things. And we've just got to be very, very aware of that. We learned that, I think, after rolling out the ESP in market 3, and then we were like, okay, we need to start asking some questions a lot earlier as well. Resource planning is really, really key. There's going to be priorities outside of your department, whether they're company level, whether they're market level as well. How do you make sure that you've got visibility on that, but that they understand your need for this project or whatever you're working on to be on that roadmap as well. Holidays and seasonality, for anyone that works with European countries, and I grew up in Spain, so I can definitely vouch for this. The summer months are when everyone goes away for a long time as well. So we can't expect to start a project and expect it to be finished within the next few months. We've got to account for that time as well and just extend our time periods because of it too. And the last one is unexpected circumstances, i.e. COVID. So, no one saw that coming. We still managed to do a lot of work, obviously remotely, like everyone has, and adapted, but it is really important for us to figure that out. But also it's meant, okay, based on COVID, Have certain teams been furloughed? Have we got people working less hours? How does that change how much work we can do with these teams as well? So really the key takeaways from all of this for me are these top 5. So 1, take time to build relationships and trust, and it really does lead to a better working relationship as well, and just much more effective working. Keep stakeholders in the loop, but definitely choose the right method and frequency. We are all a little Zoom fatigued, I think, in our day-to-day jobs as well. And then we've got, everything else happening on Zoom. At one point as well, our social lives were in Zoom as well. So do we want to use other methods of communication too? Consistent reporting and KPIs helps us set better benchmarks. And this is for us, we're trying to figure out the Conde Nast benchmarks as well. So not only the benchmarks that we see in the industry, but also for us as a company, so that then we've got the different country ones looking at those company KPIs as well. Facilitate information through that centralized team and documentation, which is so key. And the last one is things may not always go to plan. COVID's a great example, but how do we pivot and keep going, but always thinking about that prioritization and always keeping that empathetic mind of, what is happening at the market level that we've just got to keep account of as well.
Thank you, Sabrina. Very comprehensive. Let me drill into a couple of the little details there. Now, you mentioned the importance of maintaining relationships with all of the different locales and the regions, and to make sure that they don't feel as if these are simply edicts being imposed on them from on high. Are there any tips you can share for how you can ensure that, so that it doesn't just feel like standards that are being applied across all regions and all countries, and that somehow the individual regions and individual outposts feel as if they've bought into this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the first few months of just listening, asking questions, and just saying that you want to get to know them better was definitely a really, really good start as well. But actually being really honest and upfront and saying, we're trying to build what is the best level CRM excellence for the company, and that we have to do that all together, was really what set the mark. And everyone just backed off a little bit and was like, okay, this makes sense now. So I don't think anyone felt too threatened, but I think knowing that we were all in this together, and that the goal was really to take the company to the next level and the markets to the next level, that's all we really all want, right? So it really helps set the scene.
That centralized documentation and putting it in the website, that's even, I was really surprised to hear you say that you make it even accessible to vendors, and that's actually been a help in dealing with them. Can you tell us a little bit more about that in terms of, there are some real practical questions. How much, if you're going to make this a public document, essentially for vendors, how much you share with them, and then the ways in which it's actually improving relationships with the vendors?
Absolutely. So first of all, it's obviously vendors that we already work with. So for example, for us in the global ESP, we use Sail-Through, and that's the ESP we chose for the global rollout, and it's the one actually we use in the US as well. So we have weekly catch-ups, and so we have a working document, which is Sail-Through and Conde Nast, and literally we've got actions tab, or every single tab that you can think about, strategy sessions and so on, is documented there. Just because then on a weekly basis, when we have our catch-ups, there's something we're going through. We go through all the support tickets, for example, as well. And so we're holding them accountable to the transparency that we need, and the fact that we need to follow up on these actions, but also they're holding us accountable to saying, actually, we're waiting for you to give us a little bit more information of this, or this support ticket's been open because we've replied and you haven't answered for X amount of time as well, right? So it's actually really helped in that type of relationship too, of saying, actually, it's a partnership, and it's not you're providing a service and we're just going to say, okay, well, that's it. We want to make sure that if we have certain use cases from countries, we're exposing them to Sail-Through in this case as well, from an email perspective, and saying, how can we work on this together? This is what this country wants to do. Do you have solutions? How do we get better? Reporting is another one. We've built a whole suite of dashboards as well, but some we want to keep exploring, we want to keep optimizing, we want to keep changing. How do we track all of the different asks that we have as well? And again, prioritize those as well, because there's always so much that we want to do, but what's the level of impact and what's the level of effort that we need as well, which gives them a chance not to feel too overwhelmed about all our questions, and just helps them understand what we're going to start with and what we expect them to start with as well, and gives us a chance to say, do we need to change priorities because actually things have changed? And that's okay too. And
bring us to wrap it, bring us back into that broader view. You mentioned that Conde Nast has a broad set of goals now that it's applying across for its KPIs for CRM across the globally.
Yeah.
What are they? I mean, magazine industry I've watched it because I covered it for 25 years. The priorities, especially for digital publishing now, have morphed so quickly. You're doing affiliate marketing, you're driving direct subscriptions, you've still got print. That email can be very effective at pushing. What are the real KPIs that you're most with now?
Absolutely. I think consumer revenue has been such a big focus for us as a company, you know, in the last couple of years, especially. I think for us on the CRM side, we've got the operational side, channel level KPIs, but then we've got the bigger picture as well, right? Of like how much loyalty, engagement, and retention is this driving. So really that repeat visit, that repeat engagement is a metric that we definitely use, and making sure we're all thinking about it in the same way, which is linked in a way to loyalty as well. And that's the way we started. And then we've actually added all the operational channel level KPIs to back that up as well.
But the idea is that you're not being driven simply by the bottom line. There is this overall sense of engagement.
Exactly.
That's going to drive a lot of the other things.
Exactly. And then that bubbles up to the consumer revenue goals, but also actually has an impact, obviously, on the advertising and commercial goals as well. And we make sure we can show how they're all linked in a way too.
Sabrina, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Go to bed now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all that from Conde Nast Global Plan.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.